still an accident happening, even if we're 36 years after the accident, and it needs active control.
Nuclear plants were never designed to withstand direct attack. They're highly complex machines, highly complex industrial facilities.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic Course NGO. My name is Lesa Bidochko, and today we'll talk about the scale of damage caused by the Russian troops in Chornobyl zone and nuclear threats amid full-scale invasion. If you want to know more, please subscribe to our channel to stay tuned. Ukraine's security service accused Russian troops of nuclear terrorism during their occupation of the Chornobyl nuclear power plant in February-March 2022. Chernobyl now sits in a 1,000 square mile exclusion zone. Although the nuclear reactors at the facility have been shut down, there are still 3 nuclear waste silos at Chernobyl nuclear power plant. In February, Russian troops turned the premises in a makeshift military base. They violated the Geneva Convention, which prohibits any attacks on nuclear infrastructure objects. Buildings were damaged, surrounding area was laden with landmines, several fires contributed to dangerous air pollution with radioactive material. Regular monitoring of background radiation levels was suspended. Plant employees were held essentially captive, increasing the risks of human error due to stress. In addition, Russians have set up temporary bunkers at one of nuclear waste silo, which stores spent plutonium-239 rods. Russian activity left the facility almost completely without power on March 9th, shutting down nuclear waste silo cooling system. The invaders erected earthwork near the Red Forest, a highly contaminated area. This jeopardizes the radiation safety of the site, which Ukraine and its international partners spent decades to establish. Russian forces withdrew from the facility and nearby city of Slavutych on March 31st, retreating toward Belarus. On their way, Moscow's troops looted the plant and the hotel in Chernobyl, stealing appliances and even cutlery. Now Ukraine tries to restore the safety level in the exclusive zone and to mend equipment. The repair works are complicated by the fact that the territory is full of Russians' landmines. Not only Ukrainian side, but international organizations are extremely concerned by the situation. Greenpeace carried out a limited survey at the exclusion zone of Chernobyl. The survey was limited due to Russian landmines remaining in place for most of the zone. The organization said in a statement that radiation levels were at least 3 times higher than the International Atomic Energy Agency estimates. Russian forces seized the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and by March about 600 Russian soldiers were deployed there, according to Greenpeace. Following its occupation, Ukraine said that radiation levels in the area had increased. According to the reports from February, workers at the site said they had recorded an increase in radiation after Russian soldiers drove their vehicles through a highly toxic zones and distributed soil in the area with military operations. Russian troops left the area at the end of March. The IAEA then issued a statement saying that while radiation levels had slightly risen, they were significantly below the authorized levels for workers in the environment. Greenpeace said it was concerned that the IAEA had a survey compromised in its role on nuclear safety and the security of Ukraine due to its ties to Russia's nuclear state agency, Rosatom. According to Greenpeace, its current IAEA Deputy Director Mikhail Chudakov is a long-term Rosatom official. Sean Burney, nuclear specialist, Greenpeace Germany, commented on the situation.
We also have, in the last days, received information about actual firing of multiple rocket launch systems, including thermobaric, from within the highly contaminated areas of Chernobyl. And of course, these things set fire to areas that are highly contaminated. Of our visit, not surprisingly, is that Russia has committed a crime against the environment, a crime against science. The work of the scientists to understand the world's worst nuclear accident is absolutely critical, not just for Ukraine, managing the legacy of the Soviet Union and the nuclear programs, but also globally, including, for example, in Fukushima. Chernobyl is where Fukushima is maybe in 10, 20, 30 years. So it's incredibly distressing to see the scale of damage, looting, the damage to databases that the staff have experienced in Chernobyl. Basically, Greenpeace has concluded that just on this issue alone, regardless of what's happened with the radioactivity and the movement of Russian forces, that the Russian occupation is indeed a crime against the environment and global science in attempting to understand radiation risks.
Jan van de Putte, nuclear expert, Greenpeace Belgium, underlined that the team was unable to conduct full investigation as the area was contaminated with the explosives.
Still, an accident happening, even if we're 36 years after the accident, and it needs active control. And if this is jeopardized, deeply jeopardized, then this is what we qualify in our press release a crime against the environment, with the consequences for the people, the population, the firefighters, the workers, even beyond the borders of Ukraine. Of course, we prepared for this complexity to some extent, as far as you can, because you cannot walk in both areas. We adapted the drone system we have used since 2018 in Fukushima for use here. And we have measured radiation levels, contamination from the air. And the first observation we did was at a lower altitude, next slide, of like 35 meters. Then at 100 meters, next slide. Yes, so at 100 meters you get a bigger picture. And the symbol P1, that is where this famous Janov campsite is. Relatively speaking, the radiation levels there are relatively low compared to if you go to the south. We know from last year's BFS German authority measurements that radiation levels there in the dark red color are above 10 microsievert per hour, whereas in average at the campsite, those rates are more or less from 0.2 to below 1 microsievert per hour, with some areas to up to 2.5 microsievert per hour. So there's a huge contrast in that area. But it shows a huge, even within that site, and we're talking about meters, a huge contrast of contamination level. And that has to do, including with the Russian army turning around soil, and you can actually measure very low. Some of the measurements were very low contaminated, lower than what the IAEA has measured even. But you also have much higher contamination levels. So even within this short space, you can observe today enormous contrasts in contamination based on soil sampling.
Speaking at the press conference on April 28th, Rafael Mariano Grossi, the IAEA Director General, said, quote, "Of course, there was an increase in the levels, but the situation is not one that could be judged as posing a threat danger to the environment. At the moment, we are taking the measures," end quote. Greenpeace said that this information was insufficient.
The presentation by Mr. Grossi after their investigation here in Chernobyl was clearly inadequate and at several levels. So I would use the word inadequate. And given the very difficult situation for the workers, the people, the population here in Ukraine, giving an inadequate assessment of the risk is, I think, painful. That's what I said. This leads me to the conclusions that were presented by Mr. Grossi in April, which I think are inadequate. These conclusions that he drew, that he only focused on dose rate. What we clearly observed is if you look in the wrong direction, you don't want to find the problem, you will not find the problem. It's very easy.
In March, more than 500 Russian soldiers seized Europe's largest nuclear power plant located in southern Ukraine, Zaporizhia city. Russian troops transformed it into a military base overlooking an active front. Safety crisis for the West facility and its thousands of staff intensifies. The Ukrainian army holds the towns dotted on the opposite shore some 3 miles away, but sees no easy way to attack the plant, given the inherent danger of artillery battles around active nuclear reactors. Sean Burney commented on the issue, underlying that Russian troops should leave Zaporizhia nuclear plant and Ukraine's territory immediately.
The Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest, as you know, is still under Russian military occupation, but also occupation by the state nuclear agency Rosatom. The problem is that nuclear plants were never designed to withstand direct attack. They're highly complex machines, highly complex industrial facilities, but they're also vulnerable beyond the site. And in particular, Greenpeace in March was warning that one of our major concerns was the loss of electrical grid connection. And over the period between March 4th and the coming days, we in fact did see the loss of grid connection as a result of the war, many kilometers away from the plant. The International Atomic Energy Agency only last year issued its guidelines for external hazards to nuclear power plants and actually ruled out the consideration of projectiles in the event of a war, largely because they explained that these projectiles, artillery shells, missiles, travel at a speed greater than Mach 1, which means that the actual structures, nuclear buildings, spent fuel pools, they cannot withstand direct military attack. But there's a much broader context, which is how do you operate nuclear power plants when you have a full-scale war? It was never considered. Greenpeace and others have been warning for decades that nuclear power plants are vulnerable in times of conflict. So this is a major issue. There's no simple answer going forward, but it's something that absolutely is a priority to look at. The first priority, of course, is that the Russian military have to leave Zaporizhia and they have to leave Ukraine immediately, because the risk, not just to the people of Ukraine from a nuclear disaster that we're looking at in Zaporizhia, it's a ticking time bomb, would be catastrophic for Europe and potentially far worse than the Chernobyl disaster, which we are still seeing 36 years on, is still a serious problem.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic Course NGO dedicated to Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine in Flames. In description, you can find information how personally you can help Ukraine against Russian aggression. If you find our job useful, please like and share this video. Everything is gonna be Ukraine.